And a short time ago, I was joined by Cathy Jackson, the National Secretary of the Health Services Union. Cathy Jackson, welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Do you feel vindicated by today's police raid?
It's not about feeling vindicated, it's about doing the right thing by the membership, and more importantly, if the union had cooperated with the police, the raid would not have occurred. But my understanding is the police have sought information and have been seeking information that wasn't forthcoming.
But as Labor MP Craig Thomson has pointed out, the Temby report deals with the time after he left the union. The police say Fair Work Australia report contains no criminal offences, and Craig Thomson points out that he hasn't been interviewed by the police and that he hasn't ever been a member of the HSU East Branch.
Well, Craig Thomson has refused to cooperate with the police, so for him to say he's never been interviewed is just ludicrous. He must be living in some sort of fantasy land. And for him to say that the HSU East he had nothing to do with, yes, he had nothing to do with HSU East, but he was a former official of the New South Wales branch, and that branch is, that part of the time that he was there is being investigated.
How is a union branch born just 2 years ago, tying together all of New South Wales and half of Victoria?
Well, they were separate branches in Victoria. In Victoria, we've got 5 branches, or had 5 branches, and 2 of those branches amalgamated with the New South Wales branch.
But you organised the HSU East, didn't you, with Michael Williamson?
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Because we believe that, we all believed, and we still believe, that the one big union is the way forward. Healthcare's gone national, and we believe to be in the game that we need to be a big organisation, and the amalgamation was a good idea.
So before all that happened, did you ever use union money to stack Labor branches in Victoria when you ran the number 3 branch?
No.
Did you ever get money from Michael Williamson for anything like that?
Well, there was obviously elections were run and money was received. I don't walk away from that. But more importantly, it was authorised by committees of management where money could be spent. So my concern is that what we're talking about now is serious corruption within the union that goes to contracts and
Sure, was it all probably
like
authorised though, because we know from the Temby report, looking at the union HSU East, that is, it had no procurement policy, no tenders for large supply, no contracts for large supply, no pricing comparisons, no formal purchase order systems. So are you sure that the money that you received was properly accounted for?
I couldn't comment on that other than to say, once we amalgamated, what we saw quite clearly, the Victorian part of the delegation saw quite clearly, was that those procedures that you've just gone through were not in place. And this is why I took the action that I did take. A year into the amalgamation, I formed the view that things weren't right with the amalgamated branch, so therefore I took the action that I did. What
did you do to try and fix the things that Mr Temby talks about, given that you had the second most powerful position inside that union?
Well, we've been trying to have discussions. We tried having peace and reconciliation discussions where we'd put forward proposals about procurement policies, tendering processes, competitive tendering, and all the stuff that Mr Temby talks about in his report, but they weren't forthcoming. The branch was not prepared to deal with that until the police investigation had been completed.
In a complaint to Victorian Police last month against you, it lists a payment of $58,000 on April 7, 2010 to an account in the name of Jeffrey Peter Jackson, and it noted it was a loan to the Victorian number 1 branch. What was that money for?
That was a loan that the branch gave to the number 1 branch to pay out entitlements of Mr Jackson.
And he is your former husband?
That's correct.
Is this all, do you think, above board?
Totally.
Do you think that the HSU East Branch was, just as Chris Brown says, who's now the acting national president of the HSU, about factional power?
Well, Chris Brown, once again, is grandstanding. This is not a factional fight. As I've said previously, it's about cleaning up the HSU East. If Chris Brown was interested about cleaning up HSU East, when I spoke to him 8 months ago about the problems within the branch, his view at the time was it was none of his business.
So will you support then the government's move to have the HSU East branch put into administration?
No, I will not support that move. I won't support that move because it's not being done in good faith, and more importantly, all it's about is Bill Shorten propping up his numbers in Victoria, the factional numbers, and what Bill Shorten is doing quite evidently and clearly is that he's putting forward the Michael Williamson agenda, the Chris Brown agenda, and the Shorten agenda, which is to split the branches. The problem is not that we amalgamated. The problem is once we amalgamated, we saw the corruption, and what we don't want to see is the breakup of the union into separate entities.
Well, the other 6 branches of the union think that this is a good idea and they will be supporting the government tomorrow.
Well, those 6 branches have their own problems to worry about, and more importantly, when I asked for these branches to support me in my action, they weren't forthcoming. Once again, Chris Brown is publicly saying this is a factional fight. This is not a factional fight. This is about rooting out corruption from the HSU East branch.
Do you think that the people of Australia should believe that there is no other union in Australia that might have similar problems?
Well, I have no evidence of that, but what I do say quite clearly and loudly is that we need to have legislative reform about looking at how elections are run in unions, a cap on electoral funding, democratisation of unions, and if Mr Shorten, the Minister, was serious about this stuff, he'd be putting up a reform agenda like that.
Finally, though, what about the oversight of unions? Shouldn't they be run more like companies? There would be no question that criminal actions had taken place if these were companies and not under the Registered Associations Act under Fair Work Australia.
I totally agree with you. I think we need to have a different regulatory body that's not part of Fair Work Australia. It's standalone, maybe the ASIC model, but that's not a matter for me. But my personal view is that how it's currently regulated isn't enough, and we do need to go to a model more like the ASIC model.
Cathy Jackson, thank you.
Thank you.